Hello everyone, today in series of Docplexus interviews, we have with us Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar, welcome sir, who is specialized in general medicine and diabetology with vast experience of 25 years. Thank you for the interview sir. So sir, today we are going to discuss about addressing challenges of insulin therapy in biosimilars. So I wanted to ask that what is your opinion about biosimilars and where do we stand?
I am so much happy that you have asked me this question, to be very honest. Why? Because to certain extent biosimilar market, even though it is one of the necessities of the current world, have been looked into in a little different way just because of the name biosimilar. Because if you know that biosimilar is an copy or a Xerox of the innovator, usually done for biologics. Now why it is necessary? Because the innovator biologics are very expensive sometimes. So what happens that in spite of being the good drugs, not all the patients, those who are deserving these therapies, can afford this. So sometimes what happens that after the patent gets expired, then these innovator biologics are copied and they are called as biosimilars. Biosimilars is primarily a terminology which has originated in European community, in the European medical societies. Follow-on products are WHO sayings, but US FDA also has got a specific name for this. And what happens, that why it is cheaper to manufacture biologics of biosimilars of the biologics is because they don't have to pass through so many of innovation process and approval processes. Like innovator biologics have to pass through the animal studies, phase 1, phase 2 studies are mandatory. Approvals are extremely expensive. Phase 3 studies, phase 4 studies, post marketing studies, everything. So if you can say this, that if an idea of a biologic is born, so from the birth of the idea till the product reaches the end user, it takes around 7 to 15 years. And the investment is around anywhere between 150 to 300 million dollars. So you can imagine. So it will not be an exaggeration if I say that it is easier to reach the space, because if you remember, India's Mission March was just a 3 years idea and just a 70 million investment. So it is difficult to reach human body. And that's the reason why sometimes biosimilars might help people, especially those middle class, lower middle class, deserving patients, because biosimilars of biologics are so important in management of complicated diseases.
Great to know that sir. So how can unfamiliarity with biosimilars be addressed?
So we need to talk about it with a very open mind. Just do not have a taboo because this is a biosimilar, this is an innovator. Yes, of course, innovators have done a great job and you cannot deny their credits. But at the same time, we need to understand that cost is such a factor, and especially if you talk about diabetes, you should never forget that more than 80% of the global population, those who are diabetics or having some kind of a metabolic problem, they live in the lower income or middle income countries. So it cannot be you cannot be so biased that an innovator biologic you have, but you have so much expensive product that the products cannot be labeled as the products for the rich.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
So we need to look at biosimilars with an open mind, give them a thought. Not all biosimilars are throwaway products, and remember that biosimilars are not generics. Generics are the smaller molecules which are synthesized from chemicals. Biosimilars are the same protein preparations, or they are done by genetic engineering or by extracting the DNAs from the cell line, and they are protein products. They have to have the same kind of pharmacovigilance that the innovator has. In fact, the post-marketing pharmacovigilance has to be more intense. right?
Right.
So it's very important to understand that biosimilars are not generic. So don't look at them as generic medications. They are not generic medications. They are the medicines. They are still biologicals, but they are, the copies of biological. But then biosimilars, they don't have to pass through animal studies. They don't have to pass through phase 1 and phase 2. They require short phase 3 trials. They require short or probably the data from the post-marketing trials. They just have to prove their non-inferiority to the innovator product, and that's all. But they require the robust pharmacovigilance.
So can you give us a brief about robust pharmacovigilance?
See what happens, why pharmacovigilance is extremely important. Now let's consider a biologic, say monoclonal antibody, which is there for the treatment of cancer or some neurological disorders or some autoimmune disorders where monoclonal antibodies are required. Now they are huge structures. So what happens that in a process of making, it is technically impossible to replicate the same thing. Say like I have a big paper and I squeeze it into a ball and then give it to you, that this is, because these are all large protein molecules. So to make them admissible to the patients, they are all compressed, they are all compacted, the disulfide bonding happens. There are so many, right from deamidation to pegylation, almost 25 to 30 processes they have to undergo. And then you have got a molecule which generates from this much size to this much size. So you can imagine. So if I compress a huge newspaper and make a ball of it, and I will tell you that it should be the same folds, make again the same kind of a ball with the same kind of the creases with the same fold, will it be possible?
No, it won't.
Humanly not possible, right? So in fact you should never forget that two batches of the innovator biologics can also be different.
Right.
It may be innovator biologic, but then two batches can be different, right? So that's the reason why we need to understand that biologics are the necessities. These are the huge molecules, they cannot be easily copied, and they are patented, so they are in the lock and key. It is not shared with anybody. So suppose somehow you lose the molecule, and suppose the biosimilars are not made, you are losing the molecule completely. Nobody knows, the molecule will die. Got it?
Got it.
Correct.
What about the other challenges like pricing, clinical experience, reliability and reputation?
Yes, this is a good question in fact, and probably the most important question that you have asked me. Pricing is pivotal, I'll tell you, and especially in countries like India where the health system is a pay from the pocket health system. So patient has to pay for everything, whether he or she spends. You are responsible, the patient is responsible. There are very minuscule help from the stakeholders, even from the governments. In fact, my recommendation to most of the companies, that especially the pharmaceutical industry in India should, and most of them are doing, I am saying that, but I would re-insist that whenever you are giving us a product, cost has to be one of the pivotal areas of decision making. Everything should revolve around that cost factor, and in fact that's the reason why RSSDI guidelines, so beautiful guidelines they are, released under the leadership of Dr. Mrs. Sarita Bajaj last year. So I had an opportunity to work in couple of areas of developing the guidelines. So where finance constraints was given one of the most important parts in that A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H of the RSSDI guidelines that has come. So finance is extremely important, because biosimilars, as you have got a clinical experience with innovators, most of the biosimilars are going to behave most of the way same way. But I'll tell you a beautiful thing, that sometimes what happens, in an attempt to make a biosimilar product, sometimes you can end up even having a better product. Now that is called as bio better. But then remember that they cannot get license to be there immediately just the way the biosimilars are. If you innovate the bio better, you have to carry the same process as an innovator biologic or innovator product has to go through. So that becomes a completely new product, and it cannot be the biosimilar. So suppose I am making a biosimilar of an insulin, but I end up in having a better mechanism of action or the better effect or better achievement of the glycemic targets in the patient, my insulin becomes immediately a bio better, and that will be treated as a new product. It cannot be treated as a biosimilar of the existing innovator biology. Reliability depends mostly on the pharmaceutical companies and the technology which is, because manufacturing matters. See, whenever you are manufacturing a biologic, manufacturing matters, and the reasons I have told you, right? It's a very complex process. Okay, see what happens when you are manufacturing a biologic. You pick up a cell, you inject it, you take off the DNA of the cell, you change the sequencing of the cell, then you renew that DNA sequence, then you inject that DNA sequence into a new cell wall series. Now that cell wall series has to get expanded, so they are put into huge reactors. You need to keep on expanding the cell wall series, and then those cell wall series is extracted, and then the product is extracted. So manufacturing matters. So a good pharma companies, those who have got a good manufacturing plants and good according to the FDA approved plants, DCGI and FDA approved, US FDA approved plants they have. I don't feel so biosimilar should be a big challenge.
Great. Sir, is it interchangeable with innovator product?
Yes, sometimes, but there has to be a preconditioning, and that's the reason why Dr. Sanjay Kalra and the team, the safest group of the people, have given clear advices to the practicing doctors. This paper was published, I believe, in the Indian Journal of Endocrinology, where they have said very clearly that you can write down biosimilar to the patient, but the patient has to be informed about the switch. The biosimilar has to satisfy all the safety needs as far as the effect, the action and the adverse effects. And if at all you need to switch, it has to be informed very clearly to the patient. And also you need to clearly instruct the pharmacists that if at all they are doing a switch there, ideally they should not be doing a switch at the pharmacy level, but if at all it happens, it has to be immediately informed to the patient, so that he or she can go back to the doctor and ask whether should I do it or not. And of course, if you are doing a switch, you should tell the patient very clearly that if at all there is any adverse reaction is noted, it should be immediately brought to the notice of the treating physician or the diabetologist or the doctor who is there.
Sir, any message to our DocPlexus community?
Well, DocPlexus is doing an excellent job and I am very proud of them. And in fact, I am honored today to be a part of the entire DocPlexus interview series. Keep on doing a good work. I think you deserve a round of claps, for putting such a lovely and such an innovative idea, because by this you reach so many of people, because it's a need of the situation. And continuing medical education in an e-way or a digital way is an extremely rapidly developing and I would say most easy way of learning. I believe there is nothing easier than see what happens, that if at all I need to know something which is happening in the United States, what I do is that just sit on, find out what is there happening on the dedicated sites of the education. You go there, you visit the videos and do so many things. So it's a beautiful way. In fact, I must thank you all for putting all this effort.
Thank you, sir. You were very kind and genuine. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Yeah.
It was great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.